Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for coming to this live Q&A on Legends of Runeterra, where I'm joined by a very special guest all the way from the United States of America. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Steve Rubin. I'm a game designer at Riot Games, and I am the live balance lead for Legends of Runeterra. I also work on creating card content on the set design team for Legends of Runeterra, as well as working on the Expeditions gameplay mode, which is a sort of limited draft mode for Legends of Runeterra.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about what Legends of Runeterra is, but for anyone who's not familiar with the game, or this is the first time they've actually heard of anything to do with League of Legends, we're going to give you a quick bit of a heads up with a little trailer that we're going to queue up right now.
Time for a true display of skill.
My axe is ready. Witness true strength.
A gift from me to you.
Another soul lost. Shadows take you.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
So there we go, Legends of Runeterra, which we have been asked to point out is available now on PC, but will be coming to mobile platforms, Android and iOS, in 2020. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what Legends of Runeterra is and essentially what the goal of this new title is, because this is, from Riot's perspective, this is like a new title, which is quite a big deal because it's been very much about League of Legends for a long time. So now that we're moving in with a brand new title in this universe, what is the sort of like, what's the elevator pitch for what this brand new title is?
So Legends of Runeterra is a whole new free-to-play game set in a familiar League of Legends universe that a lot of players love. And we are taking some learnings that we've had in the past on the team as players of card games for a long time, and we're using that to sort of take on the CCG genre, and we're doing that through some cool new progression tools and letting players play entirely free to play. So that's what Legends of Runeterra is all about.
So obviously you're coming into what is essentially now a bit of a crowded market, because obviously it's something that a lot of people have gotten excited about after its sort of initial sort of foray with things like Hearthstone and like that. So what is it about Legends of Runeterra that sort of sets itself apart from the theme and things? What is it mechanically that makes Legends of Runeterra so different from all the other titles available?
Right, so we strive for some more deep interactive gameplay. So one of the things we really like about Legends of Runeterra is that you sort of can constantly interact with your opponent, and that's one of our design pillars where you can really have that back and forth and have those kind of mastermind and outplay moments that you might not get in some of the other offerings. We also, of course, have the League of Legends IP, which so many players love the League of Legends IP, and we finally get to kind of flesh out the world of Runeterra. And the last thing we're doing is actually accessibility. So in terms of, you asked about the CCG market, we're actually thinking about bringing card games to new players. Like at Riot, we want to make games for everyone, and we want to bring our games to our players. So not only are we doing that with some improved accessibility from other card games in the genre, but we're also launching on PC, mobile, and Android because we figure we really want our game to be played by more than just players who have played CCGs in the past. So we're not just trying to saturate that CCG market, but we're also trying to capture a whole new audience.
So just for, because obviously I'm assuming that a few people in the audience might not have played a game before. How is it that those interactions sort of happen so much more frequently than you're used to in a standard sort of my turn, your turn kind of card game?
Yeah, so in Legends of Runeterra, you actually take a simultaneous turn with your opponent, which is a bit of an interesting thing, and let me explain that for a second. So every action you take in Legends of Runeterra can be reacted to by your opponent. So when you start in a round of Legends of Runeterra, both you and your opponent will have the same amount of mana to use at your disposal, and when you play something, it gives your opponent the opportunity to then play something in their own right, and you kind of go back and forth. It's sort of like, it kind of plays out like a turn-based strategy game, and then sort of once you get into combat, all of a sudden it becomes this like crazy fighting game where players are kind of jockeying spells back and forth and like having the counters to things, and that's really how that interactive gameplay comes forth in the game.
So the thing with CCG market that's quite interesting is that obviously after its initial sort of inception, the complexity of the games has been building up to sort of try and find like a new angle to approach that sort of genre from. Have you found that trying to create a game that's quite different from its predecessors, but also quite open for new players has been like a challenging balance? Has it been difficult to find like a position to sit in where you can be really open to new players, but also provide like a new experience for those who have tried other CCGs in the past?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging space for getting that balance because we are trying to serve CCG players from the past as well as people who are completely new. One thing that we do is that we have a champion level up mechanic, which is a very, very interesting and fun mechanic for the game because essentially how it works is every champion in Legends of Runeterra can level up. And it gives a ton of depth to the game because when a champion levels up, then it's kind of like becomes super powered and has a ton of new abilities and there's a ton of depth in deck building and stuff. But at the same time, it's also really easy for new players because they can look at a card like Shen, who his level up condition is actually casting barriers on things. And like in League of Legends, Shen gives barriers to some of your allies. So for new players, we're hoping that they can see this level up and really be like, oh, like I know how to build that Shen deck, right? Yeah. I'm going to put a bunch of barriers in that deck, and then they can really satisfy that gameplay dream. And even if they're pretty new to CCGs, they can kind of understand and really feel like they can resonate with characters that they love. And that's something that we really have an advantage of with having the League IP. And what's really nice there is that you end up in these situations where, yeah, players can experiment with Shen, or players can kind of follow the breadcrumbs that we leave for some of the archetypes. So we're kind of serving both super serious CCG players and then players that are new with that mechanic.
So that's it's kind of an interesting segue into one of my other questions that I had, because obviously when you're working with an established VIP, it's nice to try and evoke that setting and try and evoke those characters in this new sort of platform that you're giving them. So what was it about CCGs that you had to sort of wrangle around to make that League of Legends IP really stick, or was it quite a natural fit for that new experience?
We actually found it to be a natural fit. One of the really cool opportunities we had on the team, and just I have fun with this every day, is that we're really fleshing out the world of Runeterra. There is a lot of lore in League of Legends and the backstories of characters, but really like what these characters are dealing with on the day-to-day might not be clear. And one of the things we're doing is kind of defining what regions look like. Like when I'm in the Freljord, what kind of creatures do I see? Or when I'm in Zon versus Piltover, like what are the cultural differences? Like what kind of characters will I see there? And in the game, we actually are introducing followers, which are units that aren't champions. Yeah. And we have this unique opportunity to do cool stuff, like imagine new characters. So, hey, what are my favorite champions in League of Legends doing, and what are their stories telling? And I think a really good example of that is Tiana Crownguard, which is actually Lux's aunt, which we developed for set 1 of Legends of Runeterra. And for players at home, if you've read the Lux comic, you've actually seen Tiana Crownguard, which is now kind of a cool like crossover, and now we're kind of really defining a lot of like what Runeterra is all about. So that's kind of one of the ways that I get excited about working on just creating a universe, not from scratch, but from a baseline where champions are things people know and love. We can take those cores, present them to players, and then kind of build around them.
I think it must be quite interesting being in that unique position of having the actual sort of inside responsibility around that IP, because a lot of the times when sort of CCGs or even physical tabletop games are made out of an IP, they're sort of made by another studio and they're sort of working to the restrictions of something else. Whereas, do you feel like you're in a position where you can almost shape the lore yourself a bit because you're working on another Riot title? So is it ever a position where you're actually pushing the lore that was already pre-established in League of Legends and actually maybe turning it into something new and something exciting based on how it's affected the rules of the CCG and stuff like that?
Yeah, we actually do it both ways. And one awesome part of our team is we actually have 3 narrative writers on our team. So we have a lot of firepower to kind of create this new world, but they also check back in with and work directly and get feedback from the global narrative team at Riot. So there's a lot of we're going to be releasing this region, or these are the champions we're doing, and these are the kind of like the followers that are going to revolve in that champion. And then we get, we create our own stories as well as getting feedback from, hey, like what do LOL narrative people think about this kind of stuff? So there's definitely a really good working relationship there for creating that stuff.
So one of the things that we should probably touch on is, this is a game that has existed for quite a few years. It's immensely popular, played by people all over the world. Millions and millions of people are playing League of Legends. And to create a CCG in that universe, a lot of people are going to have favorite characters that they want to see.
Yeah.
Like, what was the sort of process for selecting that like initial roster of the champions that you can actually play as?
Yeah, so we wanted a pretty diverse set of characters for set one, and one of the things that we really looked at is, while we do look at champion popularity as well, while we're designing our sets, one thing that we do is we try to match champions together, and we do this for a few reasons. And just when we match them together, what we're doing is we're actually kind of creating an archetype, which an archetype, for people who aren't familiar, is kind of like a deck. So a deck that does a specific thing. So for example, Yasuo stuns and recalls. So that's kind of like an archetype. So when we're designing sets, we actually look at champions, and when we're trying out different champions, we want champions that fit together well, but when we start designing the mechanics of those champions, that they can kind of fit together with other champions. So I would say that for our expeditions mode, it's actually important that champions work together, because we have like an archetype system where you draft through different archetypes, and each archetype is one or two regions, and the ones that are two regions actually have two champions in them. So it's actually kind of important that those champions can kind of work together. A really good example is of Vladimir and Braum, where Vladimir's the blood mage who kind of sucks blood out of your allies to deal damage to your opponent, and Braum is like the tank that can like absorb damage and regenerate himself and then level up based on how much damage he's taken. So when we're creating sets, actually, a lot of the times we're trying out a champion and we're like, hey, you know what, this champion doesn't fit too well. So, you know, let's look at what champions exist in the region, and then let's pick one that we think can fit, and then we can make it work from there. So it's definitely a combination of gameplay mechanics, like what works in gameplay, as well as what champions are popular or we think will really resonate with players.
Do you ever find that, so you briefly spoke about having these sort of, this new palette of things to create with the followers. Do you ever find the creating a CCG out of a game that is initially established to be you pick one character and then you go with that, and that is sort of like a solo character? Has it been like challenging at all to find ways in which those characters can work together in a solidified deck, or having that, you know, grunt level troop to have that sort of lore flavor that works with that character?
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I think a good example of that is Vladimir kind of has a Crimson Cult, which is this sort of group of characters that are sort of serve him as sort of this vampire kind of badass lord, and then they kind of sling blood and suck blood from each other. So yeah, we definitely have this opportunity that we're trying to provide, like I said before, not to repeat myself, that champions have what are they doing on the day-to-day? What are their lives like? Like, who are they hanging out with, or what are they up to, right? And these kind of crews of followers can kind of provide that narrative. But the other thing is sometimes we have powerful followers in their own right that aren't necessarily in a group. So I think a good example is Tiana, like we talked about. But since we already talked about that, I want to talk about Senna, who obviously is the most recently released, or not released, but is the next champion to come out in League of Legends. And she's actually in our game as a follower. And cool part about that is we can tell stories of these characters that really let you see that, in Runeterra, it's not just champions that are doing awesome things, right? If you look in Thresh's art in Legends of Runeterra, you actually see Senna hiding from him on the level 1, which is like really telling what's going on, with followers as well as champions. And to a further extent, we want to see if players are excited about followers. There's definitely a potential in the future where if players are demanding, I want to see Cythria as a champion or something like that, that's something we can totally explore. But for now, we're going with starting off with just the cast of champions from League of Legends, because we just know people love those champions. So we want to provide people with the champions that they love.
So you've sort of positioned yourself in an interesting dynamic where you could be creating sort of like pre-lore for things that haven't even been created for the initial game yet, which is quite interesting, right? Because you could end up in a position where your followers and characters become so loved in Runeterra that they're almost like set up to be characters and champions of their own right in other Riot titles almost. You're creating this almost like extended universe. Is that quite an exciting aspect to one of the job? Oh,
it's really, really exciting. And to talk about like extending the universe, I mean, one really cool thing is just getting to reimagine champions in a kind of a new way. Sometimes it's pretty familiar with players, and sometimes it'll be fairly new. And one really cool thing is like when you're talking about kind of the like global franchise of League of Legends as now a multi-game thing, and thinking about the World of Runeterra as something that maybe maybe one day on the same sentence as you talk about Marvel or Disney or something. And what's really, really cool is that, these imaginations of champions that we're creating, there aren't actually one-to-ones of champions from League of Legends, because there's a lot of reasons for that, like one of them being like champions are reworked in League of Legends, so we don't necessarily want to just copy those champions. So we actually take feedback from players of what they think champions are like, and then we get to reimagine them. And one really cool thing that I think players are going to see from Riot in the future is those that total buildup of what players think champions are in their heads, and then our representation of them. And I guess the example to use is kind of like, if you think about Batman or something like that, he's not a completely defined character, right? Based on how he's used, he's actually slightly different. But he always is the secret millionaire, and he always has his parents that die in some way, and stuff like that. And that's some cool stuff that we can really explore with our champions, right? And we really want to see what players think about our champions, basically, as you see them in Legends of Runeterra compared to where you see them elsewhere.
Have you ever had like a backlash from people of the recontextualization of something, like a character they're really passionate about? Has it ever come to a point where you've recontextualized them in a way where they're like, oh, I don't like what you're doing with my character, actually?
Yeah, no, there actually is a great example of this. So we're really looking for player feedback during our 2 patch previews before we eventually launch. But we were actually talking about Vladimir before. And one of the things that we do when we design champions is we look at player feedback, and oftentimes player feedback will be more, players will love a champion based on their mechanics or their thematics. So to get off Vladimir for a second, if you take a champion like Yasuo, players really love Yasuo because he can dash through things and he can cut things up, right? And he loves to knock things up and then combo them. So in Legends of Runeterra, he's very, very mechanically comparable to what you see in League of Legends. But for a character like Vladimir, and other characters, sometimes we find that people identify more with the thematics. And for Vladimir, people really like that fantasy of this kind of ultimate blood mage, right? With a ton of power, and he's a really powerful ultimate that kind of like makes you take a lot of damage. And in Legends of Runeterra, actually, Vladimir, he kind of sucks blood from your own team, like his Crimson Cult, and then throws it at the opponent's Nexus, and which kind of weirded out some players because in League of Legends, he just drains from your opponents, right? But we're really taking what we think is resonant with our players, which is his thematics, and we're kind of designing him in a new way. Obviously, there are some constraints to being a card game. We can't always do everything, and that's just, I think, a good example of that.
But I think restraints can breed creativity as well, right? Because it's always positioning yourself in a place where there's only certain parameters you can work with actually harbors you to be more creative with those things, right? So is there anything that sort of like surprised yourself almost or with the narrative team with what they've been working on, where almost it's something they would never have thought of unless they were working on a CCG?
Sorry,
to jump you with it.
No, it's just really funny because the restraints breed creativity is actually like a very famous Mark Rosewater quote, who is a very well-known designer who works at Wizards of the Coast. So I'm just smiling about that because it's fun to put that together. But sorry, could you repeat the question again?
So is there any, and it's a very specific question, I apologize, but has there ever been a time where you've been working on something based on trying to recontextualize the League of Legends franchise into that sort of card game format, where you've created stuff that you never would have thought of or never would have come up unless you were working in that framework, that CCG sort of new rule set?
Yeah, so I think a good example is Teemo, who's a champion who kind of, in League of Legends, is known of being this really annoying, stealthy unit that he puts down shrooms, and everyone hates running into these invisible shrooms. And in our card game, he actually has a very similar mechanic where he has traps that he literally plants mushrooms on your cards, and then as your opponent draws them, it deals damage to them. So we definitely have some really interesting ways of like sort of taking some thematics of a champion and then sort of doing a whole new thing with them, right? Because in the card game space, there's definitely a limit on what you can do. But like we talked about, like restriction breeds creativity. I think a lot of times that creates these like really awesome things. And I think that Teemo is a champion that is like perfect because literally people just hate him or love him. And that's exactly the same in Legends of Runeterra from our experience as it is in League of Legends. So to kind of see that kind of come to fruition with our patch preview right now is pretty fun.
I'm just going to point out, by the way, we're about halfway through our talk. We will be shortly opening up the panel to some questions from the audience. So you've got about 5 minutes to think up a good question in your head. I do just want to point out, we're only going to be talking about Runeterra today, so if you've got something that's a bit more superfluous, it might be best saved for another time. So any good questions on Runeterra, get them readied up, and eventually you'll be seeing a mic appearing in the crowd. But for now, we'll just crack on. And one thing that I'd really love to ask is, obviously, we've talked a lot about the League of Legends sort of pantheon of champions that people have these like really passionate memories of and are really sort of like familiar to them because they've played those games before. What would you say are like the key draws for someone who's not familiar with that world at all of why they should play Runeterra over like another collectible card game online?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is our progression model. We've really taken what we've learned from card games in the past on the team, and we're trying to kind of improve on that system. So what we've done is we've totally removed booster packs. We have no booster packs in Legends of Runeterra, which is something that no CCG game has tried to even tackle because it's almost just assumed that, oh no, of course you need card packs. But we really, as longtime players, don't like having to purchase random content. And we don't like it when expansions come out and you have to just buy 50 packs just to keep playing. So what we've done is a few things. The first is that we have this thing called the weekly vault. And just to preface this, because when we took away booster packs from the game, but in player labs we actually found that people were like, where are my packs? I want to crack stuff. And we were like, oh, like that's interesting. People still want to open stuff, right? So the vault is sort of like a chest that as you play each week, it levels up. And at the end of the week, you get rewards that scale based on how much you've played. So it's kind of like a free like booster box of cards that is like merit-based. As you play more each week, you'll get more cards out of it. It's free. Everyone gets that every week, which is awesome. The other thing we're doing is we have this thing called the Region Road, which is there are 6 regions in Legends of Runeterra. And as you play, you can sort of pick one of those regions as your like allegiance. And what that does is, which you can change at any time, of course, what that does is as you progress on that track, you get cards specifically for that region. So we're trying to take some of the RNG out of that equation there where you can, of course, hey, if you like Freljord, you know, you have an Ash deck that you're working on or something like that, you can align yourself with the Freljord, and then as you play, you will gain Freljord-specific cards. That will be random, but that will give you the opportunity to build more decks. And then the last thing that we're doing is actually we're letting people directly buy any card in the game if they are willing to spend money, which is actually something like pretty brand new. So I know the question was about people who might like not have played CCGs, but for players who have played CCGs as well, we think this is a really good model where you can buy wild cards, which can purchase any card in the game. So kind of the point is there's a route for every player, whether they're free to play or a paying player, to get any card in the game without relying on RNG. And another one of the things we're doing, sorry, it's a really long answer, but it's a really good one, I think, I will hope, is that we actually really want to protect the free-to-play player, because one of the bad experiences in card games in the past is that you're just starting off, like you're saying, like a brand new player is just starting off, and then they play against a deck that was just kind of like bought, right? It was just, oh, my opponent threw down $100, and now all of a sudden I'm at a disadvantage. At Riot, we just don't. We want card games and all games that we make to serve everyone and to be a level playing field. So we have this thing where we actually cap the amount of wild cards players can buy per week when new content comes out. And what that does is that kind of limits the ability for spending players to actually just buy everything and have that advantage on players. You know, they'll have to go in and use the vault and region awards just like other players if they want to really get all the cards in the game. And it's just really something special that we hope players are really going to love.
One thing that is probably a bit more of a personal interest to me, so for a bit of background, I'm from a website called Dicebreaker. We're a tabletop network that are sort of assisted with Eurogamer. So what were the sort of like physical card game inspirations that gave you a few ideas that you wanted to sort of try out? Or was it all literally just digital that you were sort of investigating when you were first putting that game together?
So it's definitely a combination. I will say that Legends of Runeterra actually isn't really inspired by any specific game, but I think at Riot, like, we're all players and we're really inspired by games that we have played. So I would actually say that, you know, a lot of us have played Magic the Gathering, myself included. I'm a former professional player, so I'm really into Magic, right? So that definitely is an inspiration for us in terms of like, oh, we want to make a card game because throughout our lives, we've played this game and we've loved it. So specifically, like we've played a lot of different digital card games as well on our team, as well as trading card games. Some more than others, but I've played Gwent, I've played Elder Scrolls, I've played Hearthstone, I've played even Slay the Spire. Even a pretty wide range of different games. I played Shadowverse. It's a pretty long list. So obviously, we have, as opposed to really being inspired by games, we actually card games. We've actually kind of taken what we don't like about those games and been like, how do we make this better? Because it's really about the players, right? We really want our players to feel like our card game is sort of that, like you were asking me why we make this game, and it's really because we think more players that play card games now would actually love card games if we made them in a fair way. If we made them in a way where we weren't being predatory, or in a way where there's deep gameplay, or in a way where we have awesome IP, right? We're just kind of taking bits and pieces from all those different offerings, and we're really trying to improve them and create the best possible product for players.
Okay, so we're going to be opening the floor to questions from the audience now. So we're going to be moving that microphone up in just a second. So if you could please just form a small queue, you'll see the microphone on your right-hand side. So if anyone's got a question, just pop yourself over there and just form an orderly queue, and you'll all get a chance to ask a question. As I said, we're just going to be answering questions on Legends of Runeterra itself. So if you've got anything that's outside of that vein, then it'll be... But sorry about the spotlight. That's quite bright, isn't it? So we've got first question lined up. And would you like to just introduce yourself and ask us what you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I'm Bernard. I'm just wondering, how do you plan on the longevity of the game? So like Wizards of the Coast with Magic, they release sets. Will you be doing the same with Runeterra? And if so, will you releasing a certain number of sets a year? How would you be going about it?
So our plan is to release new sets. We are developing future content for players. Those sets will actually unlock new regions of Runeterra. So we're doing something kind of new where we're sort of creating a new color or class or faction, so to speak, whenever we release content. Right now, the plan is to... we don't have specific plans for how much, but we think that we're going to release new content around every 4 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Hi, my name is Sarah Weezar. I help coordinate an esports team in El Paso, Texas in the States. So I'm wondering what the future is like for Runeterra when it comes to the collegiate setting, because I know that for example, we have a couple of League of Legends teams, so I'm wondering what that's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, so for Legends of Runeterra, we actually learned at Riot, we learned a lot from League of Legends. And I think what League of Legends did that was really special was we didn't force esports onto players. Players actually created that demand, and then we said, okay, we're going to support them now. So we're taking a similar approach with Legends of Runeterra. And we are setting up some systems, like we are releasing ranks in early next year, to hopefully sort of put that ability for players to play competitively on the map. And then if they're demanding tournaments, or if that's something that players are really interested in, then we can definitely look to support that. So that's kind of our plan, because we really don't want to force esports onto players, since we think it's really nice when players sort of organically can kind of create that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Might you have a time frame for that?
Yeah, so we will have ranked mode in early 2020. But in terms of the time frame, it's really going to be determined by the players, right? It could be next patch preview. All of a sudden, everybody's like, when's the first Legends of Runeterra tournament, right? And if there's a lot of wind behind that, then we're definitely going to react to that kind of stuff. So I hate to not answer that question very specifically, but I would just say that we're going to be listening to players. Feedback on the game, as well as what features do you guys want in the future. Do players want sort of clash modes, which is sort of a mode in League of Legends where players playing kind of in a tournament style, right? If players want that kind of stuff, we'll definitely try to create those features.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Hello, my name is Stuart, and you said you played a few card games like Shadowverse and Hearthstone, so you must know they've got a bit of balancing in them. If you were to, say, do Shadowverse and do buffs or nerfs every month, or do the Hearthstone approach and maybe do a mini expansion and stuff like Shadowverse does, is that something that you guys are going to do? And if you nerf a card, will I get something back for a card that I've spent money on, or what's the plan and stuff like that?
So the current plan is to have balance updates every month. we're trying to sort of emulate League of Legends' approach, where we really want players to be excited to know that the game will continue to be worked on as a live service and will remain fair. In terms of what other games can do differently, I'm just going to speak about Legends of Runeterra here, and I think that we've learned a lot through those processes. And a good example of that is we really like the kind of banned and restricted list from Magic because it's on a set time when players can create a lot of content and get excited about that moment. So that's why we're kind of excited about releasing balance changes every month. And I'm a live balance lead on Legends of Runeterra, and I can say that our team mission is for every gameplay or every champion's gameplay dream to be realized. So we will be taking a look at champion telemetry as well as feedback on those champions to make sure that they're all playable. We want it so that, like you said, will I ever get a refund for a champion? We want to make it so that's always worthwhile if you crap that champion. If we do change the champion, we don't have a set refund structure right now, but that's something that, like I said before, if players are interested in that, we can definitely create that feature. One thing that we're trying to do, though, that I think we've learned from other games is, because we're updating so often, we're going to try to cut a little bit closer when we nerf a card, because we feel like one of the worst experiences in card games is when a card gets over-nerfed, and then all of a sudden your entire deck that was built around that card doesn't work at all. So as opposed to kind of like refunding the player, like whatever the currency, we're going to try to kind of maybe nerf in terms of not the amounts, but we're going to have less severe nerfs overall and then regulate that over time, which is something that people see with League of Legends. So that's kind of our approach with that.
Yeah. One more question.
Sure.
Cosmetic-wise, are you going to do sets on skins, or will people have the opportunity to pay their own money for, like, as you say in League, they get cosmetic, a skin for, like, Caitlyn. Would the Caitlyn card get a skin, or, like, an animated version, or would there be a set on, like, skins?
Yeah, we're definitely thinking about skins, and we're going to look to players for some feedback on what kind of stuff they want to see. And in the future, there may totally be skins in our game and card backs and stuff like that. Right now, what we actually are planning on having is we have Guardians, which Guardians are very similar to what you see in TFT. They kind of live on the bottom left of your board, and you can interact with them. For players who have played or haven't, right now, all players start with the Poro. And it's kind of cute. You can rub his belly. You can turn over. He'll bite at you if you don't. And so we are going to be launching in 2020 with Guardians as well as play mats, we call them, which is sort of like a board skin. So you can, for instance, get a skin that's like a Freljord skin for your board. So that's our current plan with cosmetics. But for skins, yeah, totally. We're definitely going to see if we can experiment with that stuff in the future. And if players are really demanding it, like, oh, this in League of Legends, I really want to customize my certain character, right? That's something that we'll try to provide.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. That was great questions.
Hi. I just wanted to ask about what the rank mode will currently be like what your model is for it, and how you can rank up if it's similar to League of Legends or not.
Right, so it's going to be very similar to League of Legends in terms of we're going to have tiers. I don't work on that. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I don't work on our ranked mode specifically in development, so I don't know exactly the tiers, but it'll be very similar. There'll be a bronze, there'll be probably a master tier. And I think it's going to be a little bit simpler than what you see in League of Legends. In League of Legends, you have LP, and it's a lot more granular, I would say. So we're definitely going to be pretty close to what League of Legends is doing, but just a little bit more broad, I would say, like the categories between players. But there will be like a top of the ladder, so to speak, for sure, where players can see, oh, like I'm the 35th best player in North America and stuff like that. That's something we're definitely going to have for players.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Hello. I was wondering if you guys would ever think about branching into the alternate universes, like Star Guardians or KDA?
Yeah, so stuff like that is really interesting to us because we think that that's something that players love. And eventually, when we're creating more and more content, we're going to eventually live in a world where we don't have more regions to release. So we've definitely talked about possibilities of having future content that is related to Star Guardians or related to stuff like projects, and that kind of stuff will also potentially even mean that we might recreate a champion that we've already made, but with new abilities, a new art, right, that fits in that different universe. So we are.
Very sorry, I'm just going to have to cut you off there because we are running out of time.
Oh,
but
excuse me.
Yeah, it's just.
So yeah, we are thinking about that, and like everything I've said, like if that's something that players are really super interested in, then we really want to hear that feedback.
Well, thank you very much for all of your questions. Thank you very much for joining me as well.
Yeah, no
If we can have a quick round of applause for our fantastic guests and all of his insightful commentary. So just a quick shout, if you will. Where can people grab Legends of Runeterra? Where can they try it out for themselves?
Yeah, so you can pre-register for Legends of Runeterra on playruneterra.com, which will allow you to get into our patch preview, which unfortunately right now is ending tomorrow. Or actually, it's confusing because I'm on London time, but it's ending pretty soon. But there will be another patch preview in November. Another thing you can do is if you want to get custom, or excuse me, the Moonstruck Poro. If you pre-register for Legends of Runeterra Mobile on the Google Play app, we'll guarantee you that Moonstruck Poro. So if you really like Poros, which I'm assuming everybody does, then you should totally do that. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks very much for coming, and we'll see you in the next show. Thanks again.